Great. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for joining. Kia ora and welcome to tonight's Share Club panel. My name's Leighton. I am one of the co-founders of Sharesies, and tonight I'm really excited to be joined by a great panel with Alexander, Danielle, and Francis, and we'll be meeting them shortly. But just before I welcome them to join me, just a little bit of an update on what's been happening at Sharesies. So it's been a really, really busy past couple of months. For starters, we've been working remotely, so we've set everything up from our homes, and I'm sure many of you are in the same boat as well. In that time, we've now, well, just yesterday actually reached over 150,000 investors. So, and the money under management, or that we have invested in the platform now, is really close to $400 million. So some really big numbers, and we're so proud of everyone, and we're really happy to have that many more people empowered and investing in New Zealand companies. We've also started hosting our weekly webinars, and we've called these Lunch Money Live. So these are every Thursday lunchtime. Sonia and I are the hosts of that at the moment, and we've welcomed and chatted with a bunch of people from the Sharesies team as well. We generally talk about what's happening in the news, what's happening with Sharesies as a business, and tomorrow we're going to be joined by John Berry from Pathfinder Asset Management. So Pathfinder is one of the fund managers on the Sharesies platform for managed funds, and we'll be popping the link in the chat to register if you want to come and join us for that. We've also announced, and it's getting a lot of chat in a lot of places, and certainly the Sharesies community, which is that we'll be launching US shares soon. So we've got no specific details to announce at this time, except we're furiously working on it, and we have been for some time, and we're really keen to hear any feedback or feature requests that you have. And once again, if you want to register for early interest on that, that's in our website or another link in the chat. So a bit of context for today's events. There's a lot of uncertainty at the moment. Staying healthy is the top priority. This is unique to a lot of some of the more large market events previously that have been financial system driven, with this one, of course, being a health crisis first and foremost. But alongside that, a lot of people are also probably feeling uncertain and even stressed out about their financial situation. So we just want to acknowledge that while we'll be facing some slightly different financial circumstances at the moment. You know, there's people with job uncertainty, some people already lost their jobs, to others being crazy trying to work out how they work from home, and everything in between. So it's really important, we think, that we begin to be that we talk more about money and support each other through that. We'll be with the panel. I'll be welcoming them soon to talk through that. Halfway through, we'll be taking a 2-minute break just to probably go top up with some water, and then we'll come back for Q&A. And if you have any questions for our panelists today, then you can pop them in the questions section, and you'll see that at the bottom of the screen. So the chat part on the right of your screen, we don't really follow, so the questions is the place for those. A little bit of housekeeping. For the legal disclaimer, we won't be giving any personalised advice, so we'll be speaking in broad, and a lot of it will be our opinions only. It's also really important that everyone is kind and respectful, both towards our speakers and also the fellow viewers. So otherwise, we will take steps to remove you from the webinar, and we definitely do not want to do that. So I think that's about it from me. I'm really excited to welcome Alexander, who's going to lead our panel discussion today. Kia ora, Alexander.
Kia ora. Kia ora. Hopefully I am online. There I am.
You are.
So, kia ora koutou katoa, no mai hoki mai. Welcome along to our Sharesies session looking at financial wellbeing in times of uncertainty. Ko Alexander tēnei. My name's Alexander, and I'm going to be the online MC for the next hour and a bit. We definitely welcome your feedback and questions. What I'd like to do now is to get the panel to introduce themselves, and then we'll get going with some good questions that you've asked online, as well as questions that we've thought of as well. So what I think we'll do is we'll go Francis first, and then Danielle.
All right. Hello, everyone. Lovely to be here. So I am Frances Cook. I am a Herald multimedia journalist. If you've come across my work before, you've probably seen my podcast, Cooking the Books. I also write a personal finance column for the Herald, and I even wrote a book called Tales from a Financial Hot Mess. So as you can probably tell from the title, no judgment zone, but love personal finance. Happy to be here.
Thank you, Frances. Danielle.
Oh, kia ora everyone. Thank you, Alexander. My name is Danielle Oakes. I hail from the Maiti Waikato and also from the beautiful Whakatohea area. I currently work in the health sector. I've actually probably worked in health for the last 20 years. I'm very passionate and dedicated around mental health and wellness, and also working with whānau around disabilities and living a full life of wellness. But I have worked in financial capability within a community perspective. So what was really important for me is how do we look at health and wealth together rather than in isolation. So that's something I'm really looking forward to.
Awesome. Thank you for that, Danielle. And then just a little bit about me. So like Danielle, I also come from a health perspective, working in mental health and addictions, and then also blend that with financial capability. Because as we've talked about, wealth and health go hand in hand. Mm-hmm. And in these times, we know that they can on all levels. So given that, I'm just going to throw the first question out, maybe to Leighton first. What kind of measures can we apply for our finances during this time?
The first thing is probably being aware of them and
yes,
stocks. So using that chance, we've all got a bunch of often a bit more time that we on our hands than we had previously. So I've been thinking about it in a few ways actually. So much has changed, so it's a great time to reconsider, right? So if we start with investing, let's start with income. I think that's the most important one. So if your income hasn't changed, then probably a lot of things can continue as they were. And, the advice there is really probably don't try overthink it too much. If it was a good strategy before all this kicked off, then it's probably still a good strategy now. That's not to say there's not going to be some opportunities. Of course, if your income has changed and you see maybe some clouds on the horizon with respect to that, then acknowledging that early and trying to do as much as you can to get into a better position for that is really important. And things, there's lots of sayings going around at the moment, and it's happening for businesses and people that I've spoken to, but cash is king. So, really trying to shore up that position and making sure you've got the options and flexibility to look after yourself. And of course, I think the government so far has done a really great job with the support they're giving, and I'm hoping tomorrow in the budget we hear about a lot more, but there will be keeping an eye out for those things. Yeah. And for those people who are in those positions, making sure you understand what the benefits are and then getting them. From what I understand so far, even the wage subsidies, for example, haven't had the uptake. There's been billions of dollars obviously that have gone in, but it's still not as much as what they thought. And that tells me that there's people who probably just don't know that they might have been able to get it. So jump on the phone to an accountant or whoever that is, and make sure that you're getting, what you should out of these benefits. And then as far as the other opportunities on the table, I think home loan rates are lower for longer now. We're seeing rates below 3% now. For those who are lucky enough to own a home, it's a great time to relook at mortgage rates. I don't know, but what it's like for you guys, but for me, spending habits have changed a lot, and that means two things for me. So one is I'm looking to ways and spend local and all these types of things at the moment to support the businesses, particularly the smaller ones now in my community. But also I'm taking this as an opportunity to say, hey, maybe I don't need to eat out quite as often or buy my lunch every day and that type of thing. So and there's so many opportunities. So it's basically just a point to review everything and be honest about what's in front of you, because that's the best thing that can happen. And, and I mean that from both sides of it. So if you're not likely to be affected, be honest about that and don't let it panic you and all the news and everything around it. And if you are, then do what you can now. And what we always talk about at Sharesies, and I think it's a bit of a Jeff Bezos quote, actually. And I'm not sure I agree with everything Jeff Bezos says, but this one I do, which is worry about what you know, not what you don't know, because you can spend a lot of time stressing about what you don't know.
Yes, yes. And in terms of stressing about what we don't know, Francis, from your perspective, you've talked to all kinds of experts online during this lockdown period. Has there been any kind of consistent themes about applying, what we can do for our own finances during this kind of financial storm?
Yeah, it's actually really timely, this panel, because I just did an episode on exactly this. And one of the big tips that came out of it that I thought was really helpful was to write down everything you're worried about right now. And that's financial and otherwise. And it's important that you do actually write it down, because pulling it out of your head and seeing it on paper, your brain just processes it differently, and it really puts things into perspective. And then once you've got that list, to then cross off anything that you can't control, because there's a lot that you just can't. We can't control what everyone else in the country does as we come out of lockdown. We can't control how China handles their version of the pandemic, but we can control our own lives and how we respond to it. And then when you're looking at that list, to be like, okay, what is my next small step for the things that I can control? And to really focus on what's my next step? What's my next step? Because when you look at the whole thing, it can be really overwhelming. And you've just got to remember that you eat an elephant one bite at a time. And the next small step is the way to look at it. What's next? What's next? And I also think in terms of that, to help you stay calm, is focusing on stability and then putting in a delay period for any big decisions, to make sure that you're not making a knee-jerk fear reaction. So that stable base of making sure you've got some good cash savings, just in case things happen, so that you can keep paying your bills for a while, doing what you can to make your job more secure. That's somewhat within your control, somewhat not. So just what you can. And then looking at big decisions like your KiwiSaver or what you want to do with your job, and maybe putting in a 2-week delay. You want it to be a finite period of time, because when we're panicking, there's two very different reactions people can get pulled towards. It can be knee-jerk decisions, where you yank your KiwiSaver into conservative or whatever, and then you regret it later. Or it can be possum in the headlights freeze, and you don't really want either. So on that worry list, if you're thinking about making changes to things, then give yourself a 2-week cooling off period and give yourself that time to think about it and absorb some information about what's the best idea. And then that will give you a bit of calm, and it will still give you a sense of purpose and doing something, because controlling what you can is very empowering. You just want to make sure there's no knee-jerk reactions.
Yes. And actually, Danielle, that's a really good point that Francis made. It's about being able to control our own financial situation, and we've seen some jerk reactions. So from your lens, maybe as a health professional, you might want to just give a little bit of a cordial or a conversation about our responses during these kind of times.
Yeah,
regarding our behaviours and finances.
Yeah, I think what's really important is to take stock of where you are right now. And to be really open and honest about the situation, whether it is your finances or whether it's other things that you're perhaps dealing with during this time as well. And then just to really understand where your position is. I think that's really helpful. Often some of the feedback around with the people that we work with often say to us that, when they get a bill in the mail, it's so easy just to put it into the drawer because it's out of sight, out of mind. And it's certainly not a strategy that I'm advocating for, but it really does highlight that when we get into a situation where it is really challenging, in terms of our stress levels, we often will look at ways that we can perhaps avoid what's actually happening in front of us. And, I'd like to pick up again on what Francis was talking about, is that if we are able to have a look at what our position is and what we can genuinely do at that time, I think it then becomes really helpful. It's like the snowball effect. that if we actually address one thing, then what we can do is that we can say, hey, we've actually achieved something. That gives us momentum and motivation to keep going. Again, not just with our finances, but also around our wellnesses as well. And I think, it's interesting you talked about weathering the storm. And when I reflected on this, what I really wanted to, really put out there is that we may be in the same storm, but we may be impacted very differently from where in which we're standing in the storm. So, we may be in that very middle part of the storm where it's quite destructive for our lives, or we may be perhaps on the peripheral. We might get a little bit wet, it might be a little bit windy, but in terms of our lives, it may be just more of an annoyance. So I think it's important for us to recognise perhaps where in the storm we are in. And that way we can then really start to say, hey, this is the help and support that I need, or this is what I can do, or in actual fact, this is so overwhelming. I'm not quite sure how to get myself out of this. And so I think, being able to take stock of where you are in the first instance and to not be afraid of that. Because often some of the people that we do work with are really afraid of that. And it is better for them to not see it, not hear it, and not know what their true financial situation is. And they'll try to live in that type of stress for quite a long time. And what we know is that, particularly working around mental health, stress is a very normal part of our lives. We start to get worried when that stress becomes really overwhelming and it starts to really impact on your ability to live life like you normally would. And part of that concern is that if we stay in that middle part of that storm and we don't start to look for ways to kind of move ourselves out of that, that we can start to really experience some quite critical mental health issues.
Yes. And I think part of that, Danielle, is being able to talk about money. Francis, sometimes when we think of the idea of money, it can feel like Lord of the Rings. We love it, we hate it, want it, we don't want it, we want to give it away, take it back. What thoughts do you have about how we might be able to talk about our own financial situations to either our loved ones, our bank, our financial advisors? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, money is a fraught topic for people. There was a stat that came out earlier this year before everything went crazy. And I believe, this is off the top of my head, but I believe the stat was that 58% of New Zealanders don't even tell their partner how much they earn. So that's a slightly worrying stat for me, because I think one of the most empowering things you can do is to become more open about money. I mean, pick and choose your audience for sure, for people that you trust. I certainly hope that whoever you're partnered with is someone you trust. But when you talk to people about money, you open yourself up to just knocking around ideas and that community wisdom. And it is true that a problem shared is a problem halved. And you can start by, I think often time traveling is the best way to start talking about money. So going backwards in time or forwards in time. So if you won lotto, what would you spend it on? And that is your forward in time goals. That is your ideal life. And then actually once you've started talking to your partner about what you would do with that ideal life, you can work backwards and say, well, this is where we're at now. And if we wanted to get there on our own without waiting for lotto, what do we want to change together? Or if you go backwards in time and you say, what's your earliest money memory? I remember my parents taking me to the bank as a kid and opening a savings account and giving me $2 to put into it, riches. And that's a really nice memory. You would think that with that memory, I would be a better saver than I am, but here we are. But you can get a lot from people about that, how they feel about money and what it means to them by going backwards like that. And I think really starting small and making yourself get used to talking about money and finding people you can trust to talk about money and breaking that taboo, super important. You will find answers to questions you didn't even know you had, that you will come across areas that you didn't even know you should be thinking about. And the people around us know more than we give them credit for. And I think even just breaking the silence stops you being so worried about it. Really important.
And I often, when I run the Odd Financial Capability Group now, I often talk about that bank statement, which is a beautiful, beautiful quarter to listen to. Bank statements are like the ultimate truth teller. They don't cover up what we're spending or not spending. They absolutely say it outright. They're not like my bathroom scales, and I've got two. So if I don't agree with that weight in the morning, I'll swap and go to the other one just for me to feel better. I absolutely agree. I think and it's something that both you, Danielle, have said before. It's easy to not look at our bank statements or put them away in the drawer, but ultimately they are there, either online or in your letterbox. And I think it takes a brave person to just open them up and let's see what we're kind of working with. So with that kind of thinking about what we're working with, Leighton, you might have seen on Facebook quite a lot different people asking advice about whether they should pull out of their investments or not pull out of their investments. I mean, what are your thoughts? Sorry, what are your thoughts about this kind of conversation about whether people should be pulling out, staying the course, investments?
Look, I think if you're going to change a strategy, then it has to be based on information, and ideally stuff you know rather than stuff you're guessing. And I'm a big fan of thinking of firstly being brave, and when the times are good, everyone says invest, right? That's for sure. There's no one saying investing wasn't a good idea 6 months ago, And if anything, people are saying market's high. So one of the things we're trying to do with Sharesies is use those same comments that we were saying, and we look at them and we sort of, as Danielle was saying, we take stock. And one of the things we've done is, firstly, we look at it from 10 years, which is what we think anyone who's investing, regardless of whether you want ultimately to have that money tied up for 10 years or anything, don't invest in something that you don't think will be here in 10 years. It's a good number to think about, 10 years plus, despite any of your other strategies. I think if people start from that, so if your income hasn't changed, what we were talking about earlier, and investing was a good idea to you 3 or 4 months ago, then it should probably still be a good idea now that they're a little bit cheaper. And the other thing in particular for Sharesies investors, we have a massive dollar cost averaging base. So that's people who invest every week, every month, every fortnight, whatever it is, every payday. Tends to be smaller amounts regularly. And one thing we keep reiterating to everyone is that it's a very, very poor investment strategy if you only do it when markets are good.
Yes.
If you're only buying when things are expensive. So yeah, that's how I'm thinking about it from my personal point of view. It's like, right, do I think that things are going to have recovered in 10 years? The truth is I do. I think I'll back the sciences. I think we're social beings. We'll want to travel again. All these things will happen. In saying that, I think the next year is extremely uncertain, and I think the roller coaster has got a long way go yet with markets being up and down. And the last thing I'd want to add, and it's sort of based on some of the topics and what I was thinking about when Francis and Danielle were talking earlier, but don't underestimate the value of a dollar and the behavior of putting a dollar into something, because compounding interest is a real thing. Compounding growth is a real thing. And whatever you can afford putting away into anywhere, it doesn't matter. That behavior is worth so much more than any return you'll make for such a long time. So they'll just do it thing, we're bringing on US stocks soon, so maybe I won't be able to use Nike things and stuff, but you have to be involved. And from education value, from even if you lose 30%, I know in my case, I've got this investment club I've done since I was 17, and we put $50 a week in. And I know if I'd lost half of that money in my investments by choosing, making some really poor decisions, I would still be better off. And I'm not saying people should aim to lose half their money or anything like that, but ultimately the behavior is the most important thing for most people. So get that sorted first. And yeah, there's lots of people you can talk to, but look, I think if the income situation hasn't changed and your job security situation hasn't changed, then then now is probably as good a time as any. And I think either it's been already or sometime in the next year or so will potentially be the best time to invest in the next 10 years. But I don't believe that anyone can pick exactly when that time is.
So in the meantime, Leighton, tell me, is there for maybe say our new Sharesies holders, is being provided by Sharesies to support members with these kinds of questions.
Yeah, sorry, Alexander. I think when you're moving it, the mic, so I just missed that. But I think there's some
it's all right.
friction.
It's all right. Can you hear me?
Yeah, can you just check your connection from the?
Yeah.
It's good.
Looks like can everyone else hear? Everyone else just
is it just me?
No, I think it's a bit of a double up. Is that? I thought it was just me.
All right.
No, I'm hearing the same thing. I'm hearing the same looking to you guys as well. So I'm just wondering.
Right. Anyway,
this
I think
is best in love and aroha, right? So that we make the most of it, get on the same walker towards the direction that we're going. So I think we're doing well, whānau. So what I was saying, Leighton, is for maybe our new Sharesies holders, or for those people that don't necessarily know where to access it, what is being provided by Sharesies to support members with these kinds of questions?
Yeah. Cool. I'll answer that. I just got a text from Mikey Alexander. Just said maybe have a crack at refresh, and it might get rid of that double up. And in the meantime, I'll say I'll say our resources. Yeah. So we obviously put well, not obviously, because it may not be obvious to a lot of people, but we have a blog that we spend a lot of resources actually trying to write some quite broad-based ideas and things to be thinking about. So. The blog's a great place to start, and you can find that on our website. Within our app as well, we have the help center, so you can search any number of topics in there, and we have a bunch of education around that. We also share content from different contributors, and the two newer things we've got going at the moment. One is our lunch money, which we send out every day, which is an update, or I think it's 3 days a week, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at lunchtime. And it's an update on what's happening in markets at the moment. And Sophie, our lead dealer, writes that. And there's a bit of commentary, and we normally have a few tips and stuff in there too. And then in the last 6 weeks, we started our Lunch Money Live that I was talking about earlier, which is where Sonia and I and often other members of the team or other experts come and join us. And we just talk about money, and we answer as many questions for people as what we can. So that's a great chance to get in there, and if you want to pick our brains and if we can help in any way. We also have our social platforms, so Share Club on Facebook. There's lots of talk going on there, and if money is a tough conversation, and you don't have to go straight to sharing it with the world, that's for sure. But some of these forums, you can talk and with people that you probably don't know at all, and you can read, and reading's the first part of a great conversation, or being on the listening and stuff as well. And then also just starting to be brave and start contributing to it as well, because there really is. I think with money, people always overestimate or what other people know about it, or the position that someone else is in. And if we could just talk about it a bit more, you realize that everyone's got the same struggles, and they've either been there, or it might be valuable for one day in the future when they get there. Like, there's so many different reasons that talking about it is so great. And then of course we've got these share clubs that we present with everyone. We have such great panelists to join us, and we've also started with a few third-party contributors and you may read some of our work on different news websites and stuff at the moment, which is writing some content and some more trying to pick apart a bit what's happening and around finance, and a few opinions on that. So we've got a lot going on, and we're always keen to hear more ideas on what people are after. So yeah, you're back, Alexander. Nice to see you.
I'm back. I was listening to the whole thing. I thought, this is great. You just keep holding that fort, Leighton. This is one of those investments. We all stick together on the same waka. Hey, in terms of being, in the same waka, Francis, in your last podcast, you mentioned, second to last podcast now, actually, you mentioned that times of crisis also give us the opportunity for change. Can you just elaborate on that further on the context of COVID-19?
Yeah, well, it's one of those things, isn't it? I mean, I'm sure people have seen lots of various opinion pieces around what will the world look like now. And the thing is, forgive me for getting philosophical for a second, but
go philosophical.
It's society-wide when a pandemic hits, and a pandemic has historically been one of the biggest times of change for our society. the Black Death, of all things, is credited with creating the beginning of modern labour rights, because there was a shortage of peasants and they could suddenly bargain, and we have built all of our labour rights upon that. Now, thankfully, we're not in that situation currently, especially in New Zealand, but we are already seeing big changes in how we work. I mean, we have heard for years these buzzwords around digital nomads and remote working and flexible working, and companies have resisted bringing it in. And all of a sudden, here it is. And suddenly companies are open to it, and people might be able to hold on to this. And there might be changes in how we travel from now on. You know, we might have just hit the peak of the golden years of travel, where people did just pop off to Bali for a week. That might come back. It might not. And I would be really foolish if I tried to predict what the change is going to be, because we're well in the middle of this. I don't think anyone truly knows what's going to happen next, not just in New Zealand, but around the world. But I think what's important to know is that this is a time of change. Some of these changes are going to stick around. And so it's eyes open, ears open, watch the mood, listen to the tone, watch the changes, because this is going to impact our lives. It's definitely going to impact our investing lives. We're going to see differences in which types of companies come out of this on top. And I think it's just keeping yourself stable as much as you can, surfing that wave rather than getting dunked by it, you know. Accept the change, accept that this is going to be a lot of different things happening, and that in a year or 2 years from now, life might be quite different for a lot of us. And in some ways, some of these changes are going to be really good.
Yes. And actually, Frances, you remind me of a great book called Who Moved My Cheese? If you've read that or seen that, good book which has a similar approach. Within that kaupapa of change, you know, within that uncertainty, I think what we've seen is people react ways. And I just thought, you know, what are you as a health professional, someone like myself that works within our mental health sector, you know, acknowledging how we might be able to support each other during these times.
Yeah, and I think, you know, from a health perspective as well, when we're looking at how vastly different our communities are looking at the moment, and the way in which we're delivering health services have absolutely had a massive impact on families, on people, and on individuals. And I think there's a much more reliance on those that are closer to you to perhaps be able to step in as an initial, I guess, support. And I guess within the health sector, we've, you know, really wanted to push some of those key messages around families and friends and neighbours, not being afraid to actually ask someone, hey, are you doing okay? But to not stop there, right? Because one of the things, and it's part of our human nature, is that when we go in to ask if someone's okay, it's kind of like when a duck treads water. We may seem calm when we say to someone, hey, I see something's a bit different. I see something's changed in you. Are you okay? And in actual fact, we are panicking a little bit inside, because we're panicking because we don't want to really know what it is that's actually happening with this person. Not because we don't care, but because we don't necessarily have the education and the tools ourselves to actually do what has to come next. Because what happens if a person says, actually, no, I'm not okay, I'm really struggling and I need some help? So it's really important that we start to support people, support communities, say that it's okay, that we're not expecting you to be the expert. That's not your role. Your role is to be a family member, to be a friend, and that's a cup of tea, that's having a listening ear, and then that's saying, okay, who is it that I can contact, and how can I continue to support, you know, this person I really care about? And so it is going to be different. There are going to be changes within the health sector. And I think we're just looking at how do we embrace those changes without compromising the health and wellness of those that we're there to care for. We often, I mean, in mental health, everything is face-to-face. There is no such thing as social distancing. when we are caring for people, when we're showing aroha and manaaki. These are things that are really strong in the way in which we practice. And so there is a challenge, because to do things differently is to almost, I guess, put a halt on the things that you really value as a practitioner. And that's my, I guess my perspective coming from that practitioner is, how do I continue to provide the awhi, the aroha, the manaaki? So those are things around love, and to show the genuine careness that I have for the people that I work with. When I actually have to say to them, actually, I have to do this over the phone, or, if you've got a Skype, we can do it that way. And because I also, from a professional perspective, I rely on the things that people aren't telling me. And I rely on that, being able to physically see them to help guide some of that as well. So there is a lot of differences, but I know there's a lot of work being done at the moment to try and figure out how to ensure that, even though the way we deliver our services may change, but ultimately, how do we still continue to put people at the centre of everything that we do?
Yes. And when you're saying cups of tea, you still mean with the online, right? Or if Keith, my neighbour, is waving at me and wants to talk about finances, that there's a 2 metre distance, right? So
that's right. It's people that aren't in your bubble. So we, and even looking at level 2, one of the first things I did was, where do bubbles sit in level 2? What does that mean? And how is it that, I can continue to support people but maintain safety and wellness for them and for me and my own family? And that may be a family member that you could have a cup of tea with, that you're able to go into their home. But if it's someone else, perhaps a little bit outside of your bubble, then it does become a bit more difficult, because it is that most inner circle that's going to be the first people that will pick up. Not that something is terribly wrong or completely wrong, but you may just pick up something really slight, something really different about the person in terms of their mood, in terms of their behaviour. And it's not always just looking at the negatives of a person's mood or behaviour as well. People often say to me, they didn't seem that depressed, or they didn't seem that low or that down. But what I say to people is that it's a change, it's a shift in their behaviour. Who they normally are, what does that shift look like? And even when you do ask people, are you feeling okay? I'm a little bit worried about you. People's first initial response almost always is, I'm fine, I'm okay, I'm going to put my happy facade on, because it's much easier, right? So what I just say to people is that if you still have that little feeling inside, then just say to them, look, I'm worried about you. I'm worried about you because of these things. And, I'm here to listen, and I know I'm okay to listen, because I think that's part of the fear as well.
Yeah, well, I know we're definitely here to listen and to continue this conversation, but I think it's our halfway time, right, Leighton? We've done well.
Yeah, it is. Well done. I was just enjoying Danielle speaking. That would have sailed past me. So good on you for.
I'll keep us on track.
Yeah.